Fantastic. So welcome everyone. Today's session is on fire safety, as you know. My name is Fred Hedges. I'm one of the area building control managers for 3C Shared Service Building Control. Today we have a guest speaker with us, David Rees. He's the station commander and everything for Cambridge Fire Service. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hand over to Holly to do the introduction for us, and then we'll get on.
Well, good morning, everyone. Great to see so many of you with your cameras on and see so many faces. We're really happy that you've joined us this morning for the fire safety awareness session. So just a bit of housekeeping from us then. If you are able to keep your microphone switched off during the session, that's just to reduce the background noise whilst the speakers are presenting. If you do hear a fire alarm, it will be yours. So please make sure that you're able to exit your building safely. We will be taking questions at the end of the session, but we just ask that you pop those in the question box, the chat function on Teams, and we'll address all questions at the end of the session. Thank you. So a bit of introduction to us then. Fred Hedges is one of the area building control managers at 3C Building Control. Fred joined us in 2006 and previously worked in the construction industry as a builder with a bricklaying trade. So Fred's got experience across all aspects of building control, working on domestic and commercial projects. He's one of the leaders of the mentorship and upskilling of new starters and trainees within our team, and does a lot of training sessions online and in person with our surveyors. There's a number of images here of projects that Fred has dedicated his time to. I believe the pictures in the middle there are actually buildings that Fred built with his own hands as well. I don't know if Fred wants to elaborate at all on any of those projects he's just pulled up there.
Well, there's the Arthur rank that I dedicated over a year of my life to, and you're right, when I was a builder I built the two centre images here on literally on the scaffold. That was many years ago. Just haven't got the physical ability to do it now. Either that or I'd be very slow where I wouldn't earn any money. I actually managed, this is the clock tower in Fen Stanton, and I actually managed to get access to it one day over an issue that was concerning a few people, and it's just sort of a photo of many years ago, before there were such things as cars. You can see the horse here, and that kind of thing just interests me. So yeah, thank you, Holly. I'll let you go on. Shall I move on to the next slide?
Yes, please. An introduction also to David Rees. So David Rees has joined us as a guest speaker today from Cambridge Fire and Rescue Service. David's worked at the Cambridge Fire and Rescue Service for the last 19 years. He's worked as a firefighter and a crew commander at Cambridge Fire Station, and he continues to attend operation incidents to help with incident command and fire investigation. So we're really pleased to have David here, and he's going to be offering some perspective from his experience working in the fire service. And then in introduction into me, my name's Holly White. I'm the project officer at 3C Building Control. So my role is to help organise events such as this and provide project support to the senior management team. So I look at a lot of our speaking and upskilling events. There's some charities listed on the screen there, such as Women into Construction, and also Speakers for Schools. Speakers for Schools is a non-profit charity that we work with that offer online work experience to young students, and it's a really great opportunity for us as industry professionals to speak to young people about working in construction, pathways into that job and what's required, and really just raising awareness, which is really great work. Thanks, Fred.
Thanks, Holly. So you're probably expecting a slide from regarding Heather. I haven't put it on, sorry, but if you'd just like to explain this photograph here with you and Heather, that would be really good. Thanks.
So that picture was taken from a recent awards event. We attended the IEZ Public Transformation Awards, where we won gold nationally for our efficiency and effectiveness. So Heather is there in the middle. She is the leader of building control. She's the assistant director of planning and building quality. She oversees the management team and offers her experience. She's done a lot of work with transformation with shared services. So absolutely fantastic. And yeah, that's a picture of her there as well. I'm going to hand over to Fred now, who's going to be speaking to you about fire safety. He's going to be speaking about this from a building control perspective. Thanks, Fred.
Thanks, Holly. Today we're going to be talking about obviously fire safety. I'm going to talk a little bit. When I say a little bit about what we do, you might think it's a bit extensive, but it's actually it's a very technical document, and this is our building controls first point of call for when we're checking plans and ensuring fire safety. I'll do the domestic bit, and then I'll hand over to David, and hopefully he can cover volume 2, which is buildings other than dwellings. And I'll just I'll make a start on that then. I'll cover the general aspects of B1 to B5. So we all know B1 requirement then is the building should be designed and constructed so that there are appropriate provisions for the early warning of fire and appropriate means of escape in the case of a fire from a building to a place of safety outside the building, being capable of being safely and effectively used at all material times. So that's basically it. It's a nice, simple, sort of straightforward paragraph. We all know what smoke detectors are, signage, fire alarms, break glass. You know, we all know what they are. We've all seen them. Hopefully we haven't seen them work, but if they have, if you have, you know absolutely how important they are. So before I start getting into the nitty-gritty, I'd just like to talk a little about how quick does a fire spread in the home. So this is something that I deliver from time to time, especially in speakers for schools, and it just raises awareness. So between 0 and 30 seconds, the fire starts and rapidly grows. So if we're looking at something that's combustible, that's if we look at that point where a fire very first starts, let's be honest, it can start in many, many ways. I'm sure David could name a good 200 or 300. But if we say, you know, in the home, let's say for argument's sake, a rolled up newspaper next to a fire source, next to I don't know, an open fire or a candle, for example. And it catches fire. So from the point where it catches fire, that's the very first 30 seconds. And it rapidly grows. Obviously, you know, a newspaper wouldn't take long to go, and then obviously move on to another source, something plastic probably, or whatever. So 34 seconds later, the fire spreads from the initial flame, and the room begins to fill with smoke. Okay, so from the point of the newspaper going up, the room, you know, it's catching on to one and it's spreading. It's normal fire spread. We all know that. 21 seconds later, the temperature of the house goes higher than 190 degrees, while the smoke layer rapidly descends. So smoke layer is you've got a source, smoke is coming from that source. Let's say it could be something plastic, it could be anything, let's be honest, but furniture, curtains, whatever. And the smoke layer is building up on the ceiling. It's getting thicker and thicker. It's toxic, it's flammable, it's, you know, all this stuff that you cannot breathe in, and it's rapidly descending. So it's getting thicker and it's coming down and down and down and further lower in the room. So if you ever see safety videos of people getting on the floor and crawling around, that's why, because the smoke higher is thicker. The higher it is, because it can't get out, it's very, very thick and toxic and poisonous, yeah, certainly not good for you. So that's that's 21 seconds later. 15 seconds later, the smoke detector goes off. This is obviously just a basic sort of understanding. It's not entirely accurate to every situation, and there's still time to get out of the house. So I'm happy for David to pull this apart later, but this is, like I said, rough. So you're looking at 15 seconds after that. I would say it was a fair assumption to say this is the point. If you haven't noticed the fire beforehand, this is the point. This is a point to remember. So, because generally this is when, if we're in a house and we don't notice a fire or we don't notice the smoke, this is the point where we are made aware of a situation in the property. And that is roughly, could be quicker, but roughly, let's say it's 1 minute and 50. So 40 seconds after that, the temperature in the source room climbs to over 400 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's the source room. So that's where the newspaper and the candle, where it all started. And that's 2.5 minutes from beginning, but 40 seconds after the detector goes off. 18 seconds later, smoke will start pouring into other rooms of the house. So I'm guessing that you're picturing now it going, sort of into the hallway where the stairs are, if there are stairs. If the stairs are part of a room, then obviously it's going up and then going up into that landing area. 3 minutes and 3 seconds, so this is 15 seconds later. The temperature in the room where the fire began will now be over 500 degrees, and no human can survive that heat. So again, a little quick stop point here. From the point that it started spreading, you're probably looking at about 2.5 minutes. Okay, I don't know, how long does a kettle take to boil? Roughly, something like that. And in that room, so you, again, and that is exactly 1 minute and 13 seconds roughly from when the smoke detector went off. So you've not really got much time. 17 seconds later, escaping will be very challenging with the upstairs halls filled with smoke. So again, we're not talking minutes here, we're talking seconds. 21 seconds after that, a flashover occurs where everything in the room where the fire originated will ignite, and the temperature is exceeding 1400 degrees. We're in 9 seconds after that, 2 minutes after the smoke detectors went off, just 2 minutes. The only possible way out is the second exit.
Sorry, what's the second exit?
I'll get onto that in a sec. So we'll it's normally a means of escape window. In a domestic, it'll be a means of escape window. So yeah, and I'll get onto that. So but thanks for asking. It's an excellent question. 4 minutes and 33 seconds. So 43 seconds after looking for that second exit or knowing where the second exit is, flames will have engulfed the home's exterior and rescue is no longer possible. That's not you getting out, that's the fire service getting in. So roughly you're looking at 4.5 minutes. So just trying to, with these slides, just trying to raise awareness of the importance of the fire access and everything that they require. And I just wanted to put in that just to raise awareness. So looking at domestic escape then, the second exit is, you may not be able to see it, but so we show a bungalow here on the ground floor, then 2 stories. And if you notice on where we've got on the first floor, where we've got first and second floor, ground first and second, we have a protected route. So the grey area is the protected route, and anything up to 4 stories is protected route. On the first floor, the second exit is acceptable for it to be a means of escape window. The means of escape window does have to be a certain size. Like I said, Proof Document B is very technical. There's lots and lots of rules. So I'll try and do this in order and try to keep up. So if there's a fire on a 2-story ground floor and first story building, on a 2-story building, then the alternative exit way out could be through an escape window. Okay. However, The reason why I've highlighted this picture is because people still ask the question, and I wouldn't really say make a mistake, but they still assume that if when they do a loft conversion, this diagram still applies, and it doesn't. It's actually this one, because you're creating another floor. That rule changed in 2007, where we created a protected route for that. Again, David could correct me on that, but I'm sure it's 2007 because I remember being there. And this is where we're looking at the protected route. Okay, so if a fire does start in a room, then on the protected route, you're looking at a minimum of 5 minutes 30 protection with fire doors. So when it starts in the room, the smoke can come out, alert everybody, and everyone can escape within that time frame. So there is literally no time to start flipping your mattress and grabbing your money. It's literally, you've got to get out. You know, not that anybody does that anymore. So yeah, it's really just this drawing really just to raise awareness that does still happen, unfortunately, and we have to say, look, you can't do that. You have to create a protected route. Oh, but I want the ground floor to be open plan. Everybody's got everything open plan now, and it all looks absolutely fantastic. Yeah, there are exceptions into when that could be possible, but it's a minefield, to be honest. I also wanted to highlight just a little bit, just touching a little bit on commercial and staying on the idea of escape plans and escape routes. You can see here that we have clear. It's a very sort of simple, straightforward conference hall, office area, washrooms, tables. Pantry area, I'm guessing, is the kitchen area, no doubt, with a bain-marie, kind of, that tells me that. And as you can see, there are two ways out. This is an alternative exit. It's kind of different for flats, and the rules change we have purpose groups, which you'll have schools in that, you'll have assembly buildings, offices, domestic, flats, and they're all in purpose groups, and the rules are different for all of them, but we're pretty much looking at travel distances here, and if travel distances are exceeded, then we should be looking at fire exits, fire protected lobbies, fire protected lift shafts, lots of stuff that could come into play depending on it. But this is a very sort of straightforward emergency escape plan. When you go into hotels, if you stay in a hotel, it's normally on the back door of your door to your room, and it shows you areas of the escape route. Yeah, and I'll get into that a little bit more sort of in-depth one. So this is a much larger layout then for a office building, and as you can see, it would be this signage would be highlighted on a notice board here. There would be other notice boards put throughout, and obviously it'd say you are here, just so that you know where you are. Ever gone into an office building for a meeting that you've never been into before? The person doing the presentation should absolutely say something along the lines of, there are no planned fire tests today, so if you hear an alarm, the fire exits are over there, and back there. We have to go out through this way, right, that way, and and we have the fire route here. It's all done on linear, so it's not diagonal. So it's one question that the fire officer would ask. Certainly we would, to ensure that that travel distance is not, we don't expect anybody to run over desks to escape, and in some cases where it might be a warehouse where there are shelving, obviously you wouldn't be able to do that. So that's the reason why it's all important. I'm just talking, this is just the escape route plan. This is not what we call M&E drawings, so mechanical and engineer drawings, where there would be sounders, detectors, emergency lighting, lots of stuff that sort of, in the wiring for that and where these things are placed. So it's very, very in depth, but this is just sort of having that understanding of linear travel and the ways out, really, and to have that understanding. You can see this set of stairs here, and I'm guessing if there's a set of stairs there and this is the escape route traveling into the stairs, this would be some sort of this would be a way out, but this would be an external staircase. Again, there are rules to that. I didn't put them on here today because we could be here all day. It's one of those things that when we in building control, when we have an issue, and the issue or a concern could be anything. It could be, is this acceptable? Is this product acceptable? We could talk for days, hours and days, regarding the product, and we make a decision and then move forward on that, and then look into things deeply, because approved document B always has been our probably most thumbed document of all the approved documents. So very simple slide then, very, very simple. You're just looking at, yes, Fred, I know, I've seen 1,000 of them. Just wanted to raise awareness on them, really. So these are these. I just wanted to show these because where they're sort of yellow, these are glow in the dark signs. Okay, so when the lights go out, they glow in the dark, so they're always available to see. And obviously, you can see all the arrows on them. However, some of them haven't got arrows. Some of them have got arrows. Some haven't, like this. And I don't know if you know, but if you come across this sign, if you come across this one, you know which way the fire exit is. Big arrow pointing, northeast, southwest. You can see on these ones. However, on the bottom left-hand one here, you can see there is no arrow. And the way the way the exit is determined there is by the way the little stick man is running. And if you notice, he is running to the right, and this one is running to the left. So if you all knew that, I apologise. It's very it's a very sort of straightforward thing, but it's once you know and once you see it, you just think, oh yeah, of course. So I just wanted to raise awareness on that they they do face, and they are running in different directions. So moving on to B2 and B3 then. So internal fire spread for linings. I went to do an inspection recently, and it was on quite a large extension, probably almost the size of the property to which it was being built on. So it was almost like another property, if you like, but it wasn't. It was just an extension. And these are not actual pictures. These are just examples that but the guy said that, look, I've had a look on the internet, and when I arrived, I was absolutely shocked. The inside of his wall looked very similar to this. Now, this wasn't just one wall; it was the entirety of all of his walls in his extension. He worked in a pallet factory, and he was given all the old pallets for free by his boss. And he brought them home, dismantled them, and screwed them to his wall.
So now, just to be clear, Fred, is that top picture showing wooden lining?
It is, yeah. So this
okay,
is,
thank you.
This top picture, it's showing broken down pallets that he's fixed to the wall. Now, I just looked at them and I just said to him, there's a classification rating on all walls, required on all walls, because of that when we talk about that source. So in order for it to remain, he had to make it he had to ensure that it was fireproof. I think what he did was he took a majority of it down and then painted the rest of it with incandescent paint, which is a way to get over it. But there is, just to raise awareness to everyone today, that we're more often than not getting these is it wrong to use the term or phrase Scandinavian buildings, where we're coming in and they're timber frame on the inside as well, because wood is beautiful. It's something that we need to consider. and to ensure, there are classifications that we do talk about and consider, hardwood and softwood, char factors, things like that, but it's it's absolutely something to consider. Also in B2 and B3 is something regarding compartmentation. So compartmentation, generally on big jobs, it's not really missed. I don't know whether that's because of the experience or the competency of the people dealing with the big jobs. But on the little jobs, they can be overlooked. And this diagram from the approved documents shows an example of compartmentation where we have a garage on the ground floor and a habitable room over. So it's a part of the house over. We need to create a fire protection compartmentation line between the garage and the habitable room over and the habitable rooms down the side. Bear in mind, construction of all properties is not always brick and block. Sometimes it's more so now timber frame. So on the outside, you'd see the brickwork on the outside, but on the inside, it'd all be timber frame. And when you've got a situation like this, we need to ensure that we've got a fireproof compartmentation line between the garage and the habitable parts of the dwelling. It's achieved by having a fire door with a self-closure and intermittent strips. And the idea is obviously it's somewhere where you're going to park your car. There's petrol, it's combustible, and we need to create that compartmentation line. So it gives that 30 minutes fire protection, and it's all about the minutes. It's all about the minutes. One thing that I didn't mention on the when I was just going through the times was I actually timed myself, and I meant to say it at the end. It took me about the same amount of time to explain that to you as what it did that if it was an actual real scenario to be from the beginning of when the candle started burning that to when there was no point of escape, to where the fire service couldn't get in, which is really sort of takes on board, the responsibility of us and what we do, and and the fire service of what they do, rescuing people. So prevention is always better than a cure in this case. So just talking a little bit about more compartmentation then, and I'm not trying to step on David's toes at all. So maybe he'll talk about compartmentation in larger buildings. So this is, looking at it, we've got rooms, manager's office, reception area, small lounge. I see a nurse's office here. So I genuinely have no idea what this is. We can see a conservatory here. In this case, the lines of compartmentation are the thick lines here. Okay, and it's zoned. So it may be in a situation like this where as a zoned area, I would expect, looking at this drawing, that the fire escape plan would be a phased evacuation, where if the detectors went off in zone 7, if the means of escape from this area here was, looking from dining room to kitchen, I can see that it's separated and there's no protected route through these areas. But if there was an area there, it wouldn't set the alarms off in zone 1 or zone 2 until it was absolutely necessary. So we're looking at phased evacuation. And the reason why I say that, and phased evacuation, is recently there was an incident. I say recently, it was quite a few years ago now, but it was it feels recent to me. So it was probably a long time ago, but it feels recent, where there was a nightclub in Luton, and the nightclub in Luton went to there were people there that needed to get on the bus, and the DJ said, he's told them 2 or 3 times the buses are waiting for you. Where he actually said, and for the 3rd or 4th final time, he actually said, look, the buses are leaving. So there was a 2 or 3 groups of people that actually rushed to the door. While they were rushing to the door so they didn't miss their bus, on the way to the door, somebody used the word fire, set panic throughout the nightclub, and a number of people died through the crushing of getting out the nightclub, purely because they thought there was a fire. And obviously phased evacuation prevents that. And there are rules in sizes of exits and lobby areas because of that. But again, you know, just to let you know that. I'm going on a bit, so I shall, I'm getting there now, so B4. B4 talks about relevant and notional boundaries. So there are, this is external fire spread. There are rules if this is the property. There are rules to how we consider fire spread from one building to another. 1666. If you caught my, if you managed to be on the presentation of what is building control, you'll know that that's pretty much when building control started, just after the Great Fire of London, because they were all adjoined and you know, fire spread was it just spread through. There was no fire separation now and any of the buildings. Well, now we have external fire spread, and we consider them as unprotected areas. And there are rules if you want to build a property on a boundary. So the relevant boundary is literally the boundary to your property. And you can see this building here. They're building right on the boundary there, and there are rules to how much unprotected area you can have. An unprotected area is somewhere how fire can spread. So it may actually be like if you had a barn style exterior on the property that's flammable, and if that exceeded a certain amount of meterage, and openings. So openings would be windows, brickwork to brickwork, not just the, you know, the window that you can open. And you know, that needs to take into consideration also notional boundaries. And this is my best example of a notional boundary here. You can see two properties, two separate dwellings, with a shared driveway, and down the bottom you can see a garage on either side. The notional boundary would be down the centre. It could also be the centre line of a ditch, the centre line of a road, because we know that that's never going to get built on. This cannot be built on. This is a shared drive. I mean, you know, imagine putting a porch or something on there. You know, it's going to make the driveway null and void. So, you know, that's a good domestic example of a notional boundary. And as I mentioned before, B4 unprotected areas. This picture shows the opening and the timber clad on the outside. There are a couple of methods to do this, but the one that we always use as a rule of thumb, and you know, should be ingrained in building control surveyors brain, is diagram 11.7. If not the numbers, then certainly 11.7. So if you're less than a metre from a boundary and you're on a boundary, the maximum unprotected area that you can have is 1 metre square. David can correct me on that later if he likes. But if you look at 1 metre from, if your property is 1 metre from the boundary, you're allowed 5.6 square metres of unprotected area, 2 metres from the boundary, 12 square metres, and so on. Okay, so if you're more than 6 metres, there's no limit to unprotected area that you can have. I think.
Sorry, just can I just ask, is the unprotected area the surface that you're cladding, or the area between the properties?
So the unprotected area is the area it's the unprotected, it's the burnable, it's the cladding. It's the cladding and the windows. So if there's a fire within the building, it could come out the windows and spread to we're trying to stop it from spreading to the other property. And obviously if the cladding sets light, then that catches fire, then obviously we're protecting neighbouring buildings. So that's why that is. Yeah, and to be honest, that's in a nutshell. I'm sure David is sitting there thinking, oh, you know, and again, like I said before, we could literally talk about each item all day. B5 access and facilities for the fire service. This is huge for us. I'll give you an example in a second. So diagram 13.1 then gives us turning facilities. So first thing we look at is the access for a fire appliance, and it can only reverse. It's 20 meters because that's the maximum the fire service will have the appliance reverse. Now, there was an age-old myth that David kindly put to bed to me recently, that they say that the age-old myth was the 20 meters was there because that's how far a horse could back up with a dray of water. I've looked for evidence for this over the years. I've never found any. And let's be honest, when it comes to fire safety, there are, lots of evidence to trawl through. And it's actually for redeployment. So, even though we have fire appliances within Cambridgeshire, just because a fire officer or a fire appliance or a team are attending one incident doesn't mean they won't be needed immediately afterwards. And of course, they're an emergency service. So what they don't want to be doing is going down a, they don't want to be reversing too far before they need to get out. So, then this diagram shows that. Again, the requirement is very sort of straightforward, and again, access and facilities. This problem. I'm hoping David will elaborate on it a little bit more. But where people just willingly park cars. I go to some housing estates now, and I won't name any, but certainly within Cambridgeshire, and just to do an inspection, I have a job turning round, let alone parking the car. I have a job turning my car around. So, and every time I see that, I think, well, what happens if there's an incident down here? How's the fire service going to get here? And people are just sort of bumped up on curbs and that sort of situation. But yeah, people need to be absolutely considerate. And before I hand you over to David, I'd just like to give you an example of that. So the red outline area here is an area in a town in Cambridgeshire. Some of you may recognise it, some of you may not, but this is an area where a construction company is converting an existing building, so the first floor of an existing building, into 2 flats. This is a passageway come down here, and this is a lane. So this is actually a roadway. So I've looked at it and I've marked it up 1 and 2. So area 1, I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, oh, that looks like a bit of a pinch point there. Is a fire appliance going to go? There is a chart, and a table to say the minimum width for a fire appliance to get access. And I'm looking at this sort of hammerhead here. That exceeds 20 meters, and that's about there. I did actually go to site. I didn't take any pictures, but what I did was I took the wonderful world of Google, and I have to say that because I have to reference it. And the pinch point is here to here. This is very. I hope you can see that. I'm looking at it on a different screen. So, and that's well under what a fire appliance is required to get down there. And to my understanding, some of the appliance, I think, like high reaches, are even wider. David can put us right on that in a bit. But as you can see, there's double yellow lines. It's very tight. There's a van sitting down the bottom, and when you get down to the bottom, there's like a T-junction where it can back up, and this is that. And as you can see, this is just Google Maps. When I went down there were cars parked all over everywhere. And there's a van parked down the bottom. This is sort of the back of shops and, restaurants and pubs and things like that. So there's in and out all day, in and out all day. If there was an incident in those flats at this time, fire service would be pretty much snookered. It would be absolutely pandemonium. And, getting back to that time frame that I was talking about earlier, every second really does count. And I appreciate that I've whinged on for a little bit, but just going on to consultations, which is what we do with the fire service when we work on the larger buildings. Some of the Morrisons and St Ives, Arthur Rank, and that are just some of the projects that I've personally been involved in and took the lead on in recent years. This is covered by the FSO, so the fire safety order. And we have to do consultations with the fire service, and this is where they would help and give us advice for the section that they do. We know what the FSO is, we know what we're kind of looking at and asking for, but we go through that consultation, and then what it does is it gives them that second check. Even we spend a lot of time talking and you know, having conversations and stuff regarding certain aspects, and even dangerous structures. I got called out to this. You probably can't see it there, but that wall was pushed in, and you know, this happened in the middle of the night, and always in the middle of the night or on a Friday afternoon really late, or weekend, or inconvenient, or every time is inconvenient. But yeah, dangerous structures. So the fire service called me out at night time for this, where the, you know, a building was damaged, and it's fairly common for that to happen, you know, where they need us to look at structural stuff, even general inquiries if there's an issue that we haven't dealt with. So what I'm going to do now, and I appreciate I've gone on for a bit, but just to give that sort of thingy, I'm going to hand over to David Rees, who hopefully will give you just a little insight of the FSO and some of the stuff moving forward. So David, if it's all right with you, I'll stop sharing. And
thanks, Fred.
You can do your bit. Thanks everyone. Thanks, David.
Let me try and bring up the next slides. Hopefully it'll come in a second. Thanks for that, Fred. A real whistle-stop tour, I guess you'd say, of approved document B. Fred and I gave a session like this to building control officers just on B5, and it took over an hour, and even that felt a little bit rushed. So access and facilities for the fire services in itself are a fairly massive topic. And I'm sure there'll be some questions at the end, and we can cover all of those off. And Fred and I can give plenty of examples where access is poor, but also offer solutions where we can get round that. So as Fred's already said, we are involved with building control from a consultative point of view, where we're dealing with commercial buildings or flats. At the building control stage, they will have to consult with us on certain buildings, but also we have that relationship where they can consult with us preliminary, just to kind of discuss things. But my team also deal with existing buildings, some of which were built hundreds of years ago, and some of which are obviously built to the current building regulations. And all of those buildings have to comply with the fire safety order. Now, the fire safety order doesn't so much look at the building construction, but more how the building is managed. So when Heather approached me to join this presentation, she was kind of looking at it from a point of view of buildings that you as councillors are involved in the management of, be that village halls or flats within your housing stock, etc. So we'll look now how the fire safety order applies to those buildings and potentially to you as councillors. Can everyone see the slide moving through?
Yeah, we can see that. Thanks, David.
Thank you. It's obviously different on my screen. So the fire safety order applies to pretty much all premises apart from private domestic dwellings. And by that, I mean a single house. If it's a block of flats, even comprising of just 2 flats, the order applies to the common parts, the flat entrance doors and the exterior of the building, and anything that's attached to that, so balconies, sunshades, etc. Now, the fire safety order applies a number of duties on the responsible persons and the accountable persons to ensure the safety of relevant persons. So I'll explain what all those terms mean in a moment, but apologies now for the fact that these slides are a little bit wordy, but the fire safety order is obviously a piece of legislation, so it's hard to give nice pictures really to explain it, but I'll do my best to kind of put it into layman's terms. So the first question is, what's a responsible person? So the order kind of makes three sort of definitions, if you like. So it means in relation to a workplace, the employer, if the workplace is to any extent under their control, or in relation to a premises not a workplace, the person who has control of the premises as the occupier or otherwise in connection with the carrying on by him of trade, business or other undertaking for profit or not. And I would suggest that's probably the paragraph that is more relevant to you as councillors, or indeed the owner is the responsible person. So if we're looking at a premises that we're going to have to take some action on, we need to establish who's the responsible person. So the first one will go, is it a workplace? If it is, who's the employer? If if it's not a workplace, who owns it? That's generally how we go down and look for it. So we said that the buildings have to be safe for relevant persons. So a relevant person is any person, including the responsible person, who is or may be lawfully on the premises, and any person within the immediate vicinity of the premises who is at risk from a fire on the premises. So if you had a premises and you were manufacturing bombs, you might need to put quite a large cordon around that premises to keep people at a safe distance, that if something went wrong and I'm walking my dog up the side of your building and the bomb goes off, I'm not going to be injured or killed. The point is quite important, is lawfully on the premises. So if you decide at night you need to secure your premises to such an extent that you may choose to lock all the fire exits, you can do that, because if I decide to break and enter, I am not lawfully on the premises. Therefore, I'm not covered by the order. And if a fire starts while I'm there, I don't have to be able to escape the building safely. It does not include fire service while they're carrying out firefighting actions. But if I were to come to do an inspection, I would be a relevant person because I'm lawfully on the premises and I'm not carrying out emergency service work. So how do we make sure the building's safe? So the first thing a responsible person needs to do is conduct a risk assessment. And that's Article 9 of the Fire Safety Order. OK, so the actual text is up there on the screen if you'd like to read it. But basically, what do you need to do? You can either do a fire risk assessment yourself if it's a simple premises, or you can employ a fire risk assessor to carry out that work for you. So it's down to you as the responsible person to make the decision whether you or someone within your team or employment is competent to do that risk assessment. If they are, fantastic. If not, find someone who is competent, pay them to do it for you, and then they take on that responsibility. So the process is simply, what are the ignition sources? What's going to cause a fire? And can I do something to reduce those? Yeah, so we could say electrical equipment is a key thing that might start a fire in a premises. So what can I do to reduce that risk? Well, I could instigate PAT testing to make sure that those pieces of equipment are as safe as possible. What combustible items are there in the building? So can I reduce the amount of combustible material? Think about waste storage, for example. If you're running an area that uses lots of a bar or something where you're using lots of cardboard boxes, get the waste collected regularly, store it well away from the building. We've reduced the combustible materials. Make sure the combustible materials and the ignition sources are kept separate. So you do your risk assessment, that gives you some significant findings or action points. You carry out those action points and that reduces the risk down, and record what you've done. So the other thing you need to do is ensure that people will receive warning in the event of a fire. So Fred's first slide showed us fire alarms, smoke detection, etc. Now you might not need that if the building is very simple and open in its layout. So if we've got a village hall that comprises of a village hall and maybe 2 sets of toilets, we might not need an alarm system there, because we're going to say, well, everyone's awake and familiar-ish with the building. If we see a fire, we're going to see it, and because it's a one big open space, people are the best fire detectors there are, because we can see it, we can smell it, we can hear it, and generally we'll spot it before a smoke detector will. So you could say our fire emergency plan is someone sees fire, they shout fire, fire, and we all run out all of the exits. So the other thing you need to do is make sure that everyone can escape the building. Yeah, so Fred put up some great diagrams with escape routes. The key is, have I got enough exits for the amount of people I'm going to have in the building? And are they readily available? So they're not blocked, they're not locked, they need to be easily openable without the use of a key. So the old push bars and push pads are what we need. And make sure you regularly check that they're usable. So check the outside as well as the inside, that someone hasn't locked their bike up or parked their car right in front of the exit, so they're not usable. So that's simply what you need to do. Can everyone get out if there's a fire? And is everyone going to be aware that there is a fire should one happen? On our website, there's far more detail on how to do a fire risk assessment, and also downloadable blank templates for a simple premises to do a risk assessment on. So the order requires you as responsible persons to take general fire precautions. Yeah, and there's another article, Article 4, that details what they are. But you must A, take such general fire precautions as will ensure, so far as reasonably practicable, that the safety of any of your employees, and in relation to relevant persons who are not his employees, take such general fire precautions as may be reasonably required in the circumstances in case to ensure that the premises are safe. Note there, the key words for me is reasonable and practicable. Yeah, sometimes it's not reasonable or practical to say, well, we're going to install an all singing, all dancing alarm system and a sprinkler system if we've got a one-room scout hut. Yeah, it certainly would make the building safer, but is it proportionate to the risk? It probably isn't. So there are the general fire precautions. I shan't read them out because it's quite a wordy slide. But if you access the fire safety order, if you're interested, you can get it via our website or just on the YouGov website. That's Article 4, details those general fire precautions. But I've made it slightly more simple here in sort of plain English rather than legal speak. As I've already said, the duties of the responsible person would include ensuring the fire alarm, if it's installed, is tested weekly and also annually by a competent person in line with the British standard, which is 5839. Ensure that emergency lighting, if required and installed, is tested monthly and also annually by a competent person. That the risk assessment is produced and reviewed regularly. Yeah, so if something changes within the building, we should review the risk assessment. If the process that's going on within the building changes, we should review the risk assessment. And we would recommend regularly, if there is no change, would be annually. Yeah. Ensure there's adequate means of escape. Yeah, so can everyone easily fall out the building? And ensure that any staff receive training, fire safety training. Yeah, and that training should also be extended to anyone who has control of the building at any time. And we'll come on to that as we come towards the end. So if we take the example of a village hall, yeah, the responsible person needs to ensure they've come up with an evacuation plan or evacuation strategy for that building. And it can be really, really simple. You know, if it's a simple premises, in the event of the fire alarm going off, exit via the nearest exit, and everyone's going to meet at the assembly point. Now, you may put a sign up like Fred had at the very beginning, or it may simply be the giant oak tree in the car park, because you may not be able to put a sign up if you don't own the land outside. But as long as it's there, the evacuation plan is displayed and is clearly explained to everyone who's using the premises. I mean, the person who's in control of the premises for any one time. So if we've got the Cub Scouts in there on a Monday night, our Kayla, who's in charge of this Cub Scouts, for that period takes on some responsibility. So that person is responsible for making sure they manage the evacuation when they're there. They make sure the exits are openable, and they make sure that at reasonable times they explain to their cubs, if we have a fire alarm, this is what we're going to do, boys and girls. Same as if the next day it's the WI use it, whoever's in charge of that must also have received some sort of communication from the responsible person. This is what to do in the event of fire. These are all the necessary safety systems, and they need to tell their guests or their members what they need to do. The responsible person needs to make that as simple as possible by making sure there's clear signage on all the exits so that anyone can go in there and go, right, if there's a fire, I know what to do. Yeah. Luckily, adults tend to be able to work it out for themselves, and generally children are fantastic at fire evacuation because they do it every term at school. So under Article 5, we've got the duties of the fire safety order. Now, I've highlighted or emboldened Article point 3 there because we use the term a 5-3 person. So you may be the responsible person for the building, but you are probably not a fire alarm engineer. and you're probably not a fire risk assessor. So as long as you make reasonable inquiries to ensure the person you're employing to do that work is competent, they take on that responsibility. So if you've said to someone, you're my fire alarm engineer, and they say, yeah, here's my qualifications, I'm registered with so-and-so, they come and test your alarm system, and the following week it fails to operate, that responsibility falls to the fire alarm engineer, not to you. Same as your risk assessment. If you pay for a risk assessment and the risk assessor does a really poor job, and we come and do an audit of the premises and said this risk assessment really is not suitable or sufficient for the premises, and we were going to take some sort of action, first inquiry would be to see that you'd made reasonable inquiries and you hadn't just said, oh, a chap down the pub said he knew about fire risk assessment, so I gave him the job. You said, well, I got 3 quotes. I went on the internet and I found the Institution of Fire Engineers and I looked at their list, and then I went to another recognised accredited body and looked at their list and then employed someone from there. You've done your due diligence. So at that point, the offence would be passed to that risk assessor, and we would look to take them to court in the worst case scenario. And if anyone's ended up watching any of the Grenfell Tower inquiry, the fire risk assessor that had been involved in that premises, I think we could say was torn to shreds. It's a polite way of putting it, because he himself admitted that he did not have competence for the level of complexity of that building. He was probably very competent to do a simple village hall, but not to do a building of that nature. So that relieves you slightly of some of your duties. Now, obviously within an hour, Fred and I have struggled to kind of give you everything you need to know about fire safety. We run, as the fire service, a monthly fire safety training session. It is called a business seminar on our website. That name is due to change because we've decided that business seminar seems a little bit formal, but it's basically a 2-hour fire safety training for responsible persons, business owners or owners of other premises, and we cover in much more detail what a fire risk assessment looks like, how to conduct a simple one, what measures need to be in your building, and we cover things like Fred's covered on a commercial premises, what the escape route should look like in different types of premises. So if you or anyone you know would like to attend one of those courses, there's a link in the slides, and I think Holly's probably going to make the slides available. But if you can't get to those, if you just go onto our website, click under business fire safety, and it will take you to a fire safety seminar. They're currently delivered on Teams. We moved them over to Teams in the pandemic, and it seems to be working better because it makes it much more accessible to all, rather than having to come into Cambridge Fire Station or Peterborough Fire Station. I just added at the end of this slide this morning the Fire Safety England regulations. Now, I don't know if any of you are involved in the management of blocks of flats, but new regulations were laid last week, which put further requirements on responsible persons for flats. So that's something to be aware of. Again, if you just go on the government website and look at those regulations, they're there. But they bring into play the need to inspect fire doors is one of the key points on there, including the front doors of people's flats, to making sure they remain self-closing, got strips and seals, and they close properly. But that is a whole nother lecture in itself, so we won't go on that one there. I'm guessing we've probably got a number of questions by looking at what's popped up in the chat, so now's probably a good time to go on to any questions. I'll stop sharing my screen.
We'll just stop the recording session.